Mom, I remember how you used to trace stars on my back to help me sleep. The entire courtroom fell into a breathless silence. The voice didn't come from a witness, not from a lawyer either. It came from a child, an 8-year-old boy, standing barefoot on the cold wooden floor of a federal courtroom. Aiden, face solemn, arm outstretched, pointing directly at the woman he called Mom. The woman seated behind the highest bench, draped in the power of her black robe, Judge Cassandra Rhodes. He kept going, voice steady, calm. The silver moon-shaped necklace. And the birthmark, a crescent, on your right shoulder blade. Every time you hugged me, I could feel it, like a piece of the sky stuck to your back. Cassandra dropped her gavel. The sound of metal striking frozen stone rang out like a bomb, in a room trained to remain composed. Over 200 people, lawyers, officers, journalists, the public, all holding their breath. Some glanced at each other, thinking this must be part of a staged performance. Others squinted, waiting for Cassandra to deny it, or laugh it off as a child's confusion. But she did neither. She just stood there, frozen. Her lips moved, but no words came out. In that strange moment, the law no longer rested in her hands. It rested in his. A child's hand, armed with a memory that couldn't be faked, couldn't be rehearsed, couldn't be denied. And one question echoed through every mind in that room. Who is this boy? And how does he know? Is there something that even justice once tried to bury? New Orleans, a city where masks are worn year-round, not just during a Mardi Gras. Where antique gas lamps light up cobblestone streets, but never brightly enough to expose the rot festering beneath the glamour. In the heart of that city, Cassandra Rhodes was seen as a pillar of justice. She didn't smile for cameras. She didn't shake politicians' hands. She didn't flinch at emotional pleas. One wrong line, and the whole trial collapses. That was the declaration that made the legal world both fear and revere her. At 52, she carried the grit of granite, the discipline of a soldier, and an almost religious conviction. The law is the only thing pure enough to cleanse a blood-stained society. But today, the person standing before her wasn't a criminal, wasn't a lawyer. It was an 8-year-old boy, Aiden, sitting upright, no trembling hands, no eyes darting away. His presence didn't feel like a child coached by anxious parents before court. It felt like someone who had lived in this courtroom for lifetimes. Then he spoke, unprompted. "Objection, ma'am. This isn't a ruling. This is abandonment." The entire courtroom turned, but no one laughed. The way he said it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded like he was putting the system itself on trial. Judge Rhodes squinted, but stayed silent, because for the first time, in the depths of her eyes, there was a flicker of doubt. And the people watching, they no longer saw a child as a victim. They saw him as a living indictment with a memory too sharp to be coincidence. Before the black robe, before the gavel ever touched her hand, Cassandra Rhodes was a senior law student. Smart, ambitious. She believed justice was a battle she could win with enough patience and logic. But everything shattered on a September night. The man who attacked her wasn't a stranger. He was her father's legal advisor, a close family friend from the justice circle. She told her family. But instead of protection, she was smothered in silence and fear. Reputation, they said. Upcoming campaign, they reminded her. The honor of the Rhodes name couldn't be tainted by a little slip. Her mother, Senator Marion Rhodes, stepped in. She offered a solution to make everything disappear. A secret deal with an organization called Avalon Reach. They'll erase it all. Medical records, birth certificate, identity. The baby will never exist. Cassandra wasn't asked, only told to sign. And then, in a room cold as stone, she was allowed to hold her baby for exactly 17 minutes. She named him Orion after the constellation she used to stare at through the hospital window. During sleepless nights of pregnancy, while the world outside slept, and she didn't. Orion opened his eyes once, twitched his tiny hand, and wrapped his fingers around her index. Cassandra still remembers that feeling. A feeling no law could ever define. 17 minutes later, they took him. No cry. No record. No one said goodbye. All that remained was a mother and a fracture in her soul, buried under the title Career. After that courtroom session, Cassandra didn't return to her office. She didn't hold a press conference. Didn't answer reporters. Instead, she called someone. Someone from her past she had once refused to ever need. Julian Park, former federal investigator. The only man who once got an entire chain of private detention centers shut down with nothing but a USB drive. He also knew one thing better than anyone. The biggest crimes don't leave fingerprints, they leave holes. Julian started with Aiden's birth certificate. A blurry scan. No state registration number. Then came the medical records. No vaccinations for year 2 or 3. The boy seemed to have only appeared when he turned 6. All clues pointed back to one name, Avalon Reach. An organization once labeled a family counseling and emotional reconstruction center for abandoned children. It had been investigated for suspected trafficking, but all records were closed due to insufficient evidence. No one was convicted. Just a website scrubbed from the internet and a crumbling facility left abandoned on the outskirts of Baton Rouge. And then someone stepped out from the shadows of that past. Nyla Carter. Attorney. 25 years old. A survivor who had lived inside an Avalon facility for 7 years, under the name case number 241G. When she met Aiden, she didn't look at his face. She looked at his back and whispered, the crescent-shaped birthmark. They call it a birth seal. It's how they mark kids who were put through the memory reset program. Each child has a unique one. No two are alike. I used to have a little brother. They took him in November of 2001. And I never found him again. Cassandra stared at Nyla. And in her eyes, there was no longer doubt. Only recognition. Bitter. Raw. Irreversible. Light rain in New Orleans. The distant wail of sirens. Wind slipping through the windows of the top-floor loft. Cassandra was making chamomile tea. Aiden had just finished writing a short entry in his new journal. For the first time in 8 years, she saw her son's handwriting. My name is Orion, but if you want to call me Aiden, that's okay. I'm not mad. As long as you still draw stars on my back every night. Aiden, page 3, mother and son drifted asleep on the couch. The lights were still on. The tea had gone cold. Unspoken words still hanging in the air. And then, at 3:12 a.m., the shadow arrived. 4 figures. White lab coats. Face masks. No weapons. No footsteps. No warrant. No authority. Just a folder, bearing a logo erased from all systems 5 years ago. Avalon Reach. They didn't knock. They didn't call his name. They simply opened the door, as if they had never really left. Aiden was lightly sedated, wrapped in a gray medical blanket, and disappeared again. The next morning, Cassandra woke to a cold, empty space beside her. No signs of forced entry. Nothing caught on the cameras. Only a letter left on the bed, machine printed, unsigned. The child belongs to the system. Do not interfere if you want peace. Beside the letter, on the table, was the journal they had just begun writing together. On the first page, her own handwriting still intact. Every star I draw on your back is something I never got the chance to say. This time, it wasn't 17 minutes. It was the second time she lost her son. And this time, she stayed silent no more. Julian sat in his car, eyes locked on the laptop screen. Files decrypted one by one from Avalon's hidden server, each one slicing deeper into the last fragments of Cassandra's faith. Zero Seed, a collective of 29 children. No real names, no nationalities. Raised inside a sealed system where memories weren't erased completely, but restructured with purpose. Aiden was one of them. He didn't return for reunion. He was reinserted as a living experiment. A test to measure the biological attachment threshold between a mother and her biological child. Observe. Record. Measure. Evaluate. If memory is returned, can it remain intact? Can maternal love override programming? Cassandra wasn't the one who found her child. She was the subject. The test. To determine whether she was worthy of keeping the memory of that child. Julian scrolled to a note pulled from Aiden's file. Subject 14B, Orion Aiden, placed in contact with maternal source for 72 hours. Monitor natural bonding responses. If attachment score exceeds 0.83, authentic memory sequence will be unlocked. If not, subject will be recalled and reprogrammed. The boy with the gentle smile. The one who said, "Every star you draw on my back is something you never got to say." He wasn't just a son. He was a tool. Cassandra had no idea. She was being tested. But every hidden camera, every touch, every glance, every tear had already been recorded. Nyla Carter, in the dark of a room with no light, typed the final lines into Avalon's encrypted data gate. Each string of code that unlocked revealed not just files, but a list. 28 children. Codename Zero Seed. Each child was assigned a genetic ID, a scheduled pattern of interaction, and a set of emotional triggers to be activated upon contact with a biological relative. Each child was a program designed to test humanity. Next to every name, a funding account ID, and when Nyla reached the 29th line, she stopped breathing. Rhodes M. Routing code, Red Mar 918T. Location, Ethics Committee, Louisiana State Congress. Marion Rhodes, a senator. The woman who once paved Cassandra's way into law school. The one who ordered everything erased after the assault. And now, the primary funder of Avalon. Cassandra sat motionless as Julian read the file aloud. Her face blank. But her hand, for the first time, trembled. Marion didn't just want to bury a mistake. She wanted to reshape an entire generation into beings without personal memory, to fuel a political dream where humans could be emotionally programmed, taught to love their country, but never allowed to remember, who once held them as a child. In the shadows of law and medicine, Avalon wasn't a treatment center. It was a tool. And the children were not patients, not victims. They were assets, biological stock options. Maple Hollow, a name that sounds like a countryside wellness center for children. But tonight, under the cold light of the moon, it loomed like a silent fortress in the woods, where emotions were managed by code. Cassandra, Julian, Nyla, and Father Eland, the aging priest who once helped Cassandra escape her family to give birth, stood before the power-cut iron gates. Each carried a different reason, a different scar, but the same resolve, to stop children's memory from being programmed ever again. Julian adjusted the body cam on his chest. Nyla tested the live stream signal. Cassandra held Aiden's journal in her hand, still clinging to a single short strand of hair, curled softly in the corner of a half-written page. I do miss you. But I don't know if I'm allowed to. They stepped inside. The smell of antiseptic. Walls white and cold as bone. CCTV cameras panning in slow arcs. And behind one-way glass, dozens of children sat upright. Eyes unblinking. No names. No laughter. On their wrist, emotion chip. That shifted from blue to red anytime they showed a forbidden feeling. Longing, fear, love. Every affectionate gesture. Punished. Nyla activated the live stream. The feed spread across the state. Within 30 seconds, thousands were watching. Cassandra stepped into the final room. And there, she saw Aiden, strapped to a metal chair. Bruised temple. Cracked lips. The moment he saw her, he didn't cry like a child. He screamed like a soul, being crushed. They told me, if I broke character, you'd abandon me. His voice echoed through the mic. The live stream exploded. That sentence wasn't just a cry. It was a blow to the conscience of a nation. No one could pretend not to see. No one could close the stream and look away. Because when a child has to ask for permission just to feel, it's no longer an experiment. It's torture. The federal court opened under a suffocating atmosphere. Outside, hundreds had gathered since 4 a.m. Online, Nyla's live stream had reached 14 million views, becoming the fastest shared video in Louisiana's history. Inside, a single spotlight illuminated the witness stand. The boy, Aiden, or more truthfully, Orion, stepped forward, still wearing the same hospital gown, wrists still marked with the imprint of restraints, but his eye unshaken. No guardian lawyer, no prepared statement, just his voice, low, steady, resonating through the packed courtroom. I was born a name. They tried to make me a function. Silence. No one dared to move. The chief judge placed a hand over her heart. A juror wept. It wasn't a testimony. It was a declaration. Julian stepped up and cued the display. Internal Avalon Reach documents, logging memory manipulation, behavioral codes, and the grooming of zero-seed children. Then came Nyla, hands trembling slightly, but her gaze locked, presenting financial records. Hundreds of hidden transactions from private funds into Avalon's system. And finally, the last screen, a name, repeating like a fingerprint that couldn't be erased. Senator Marion Rhodes, mother of Honorable Judge Cassandra Rhodes. The room froze. The same woman who once ordered a child erased to protect a name was the grandmother who funded the program that stripped him of memory. Cassandra sat motionless. No longer a judge. No longer a guardian of the law. Just a mother. And a child who had just forced an entire system to bow with a single sentence. Cassandra Rhodes officially announced her resignation. No press conference. No public apology. Just a letter. And a handwritten quote. Justice isn't what you enforce. It's what you choose to protect when no one's watching. Alongside Julian, Nyla, Father Elin, and Orion, the son who had been taken from her twice, they founded Project Orion, an initiative to help children who had been programmed, forced to forget who they were, recover memory and humanity. Not called therapy, not called reintegration. They called it calling back the true name. Aiden, now Orion, chose to keep both names. He said with a tilted smile, Aiden was the name they gave me. But Orion was what you gave me, even when you weren't allowed to. I'm not a product. I'm a person. Every evening, mother and son sat at the wooden table writing in their journals. Cassandra wrote in careful script. Orion's writing leaned crooked, messy, but every line stitched together another era of memory. One night, as crickets chirped outside the window, and the last light in the house turned soft and gold, Orion set his pen down and looked up. Mom, do you ever look up at the sky and search for the Orion constellation? Cassandra smiled. For the first time in years, not a single tear fell. Only her voice, low, warm, steady as the sky after a storm. Every trial I ever presided over was a trial where I silently asked, where are you in this world? Orion nodded. He didn't speak again. He opened the piano, the same one she used to play as a girl, and laid his fingers on the keys. A melody rose, unfinished, imperfect, but real. Like memory, being rewritten. Early morning. Sunlight spilled through the window, painting soft streaks across the wooden floor. No courtroom. No case files. No testimony. Just music. Cassandra had just come down the stairs, still holding a cup of hot tea in her hand when she heard it. A melody, fragile, trembling, unfinished. Some parts stumbled, some stretched out like they were gasping for air. From the piano in the living room, Aiden Orion sat there, playing a lullaby he'd never been taught. His hair tousled, fingers thin. He didn't look at his mother. He simply whispered, as if speaking to someone inside himself. I remember the lullaby you used to hum. Back when I didn't know my name. Back when you didn't know if I was even allowed to live. Cassandra slowed her steps. Her hand clenched the teacup, then let go. The first tear fell on the G key. It echoed, long, steady, not off key, not breaking the rhythm. Just making the song more real. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms. It comes from the moment you know your name is still remembered. Cassandra knelt beside him. No words, no embrace. Just her voice, soft, low, humming the last lines of the lullaby. And then she placed her hand on Orion's shoulder. Not as a judge, not as a victim, but as someone who finally understood the nature of light after walking through darkness. Justice isn't the rule book. It's who you choose to protect when no one's watching. And true memory is never programmed. It just needs to be called by its name. And that was enough. Enough to let a generation begin again with the name it was once told to forget.